What is going on, everyone? This is the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast, episode 23 coming your way. My name's Meek. I got my co-host Wu across the table. Wu, what's going on today, brother?
Oh, man. Today was a great day.
Golf day for you, huh?
Oh, golf weekend.
Well, golf weekend.
I played 36 this weekend.
Love that.
Slight flex. Swing feels okay. I'm not sore right now.
We're not slicing off.
Yeah, we're not slicing. Hey, we're figuring it out. What we need to do now is limit mistakes.
Yep.
And then when we do make a mistake, need to figure out how to not make more after that.
Okay.
And snowball after that. But the game feels good right now. I'm pretty confident the rest of the year. I think I might break 85 this summer.
Wow,
I think
breaking 85.
That's my goal right now.
Listen, I'm not a golf guy, but like I get the breaking 85. What's your best score ever?
So my best score is an 85.
Oh, is it?
So that's 85? Why breaking 85 is the goal. Golf is such a stupid sport. I'll have some great swings and some really bad ones, and then you could have a terrible round, and your last hole could be great, and then you think about it all week. And you're like, oh, when's the next time I can play?
You're just hooked.
Yeah, and then you're miserable for half the holes, and then it's like you just repeat that process until you finally become good. So who knows?
You're probably thinking, ladies and gentlemen, is this a golf podcast? No. This is the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast.
You don't want to see my swing.
We're here to talk football, but it's great to break up the monotony every so often. But welcome. We appreciate you tuning in. Whether it's via YouTube like this video format you're seeing, or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts like you are listening to today. But quick thing at the top of the show. 1,200 plus plays across Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
I remember when we were like in the hundreds.
In the hundreds, right? Now we've hit the thousands, and we're just going to keep going from there. But make sure you're following us on all of our socials, Twitter at Fourth and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at Fourth and Fantasy. I will say real quick, the TikTok is blowing up, and we appreciate the love that you guys are giving us on TikTok.
100%.
Instagram, you might need to, help us out a little bit, so make sure you're following us at Fourth and Fantasy, and make sure you're checking us out at YouTube or Fourth and Fantasy as well. Quick question of the day. We're talking about underrated offenses for fantasy this year. So we'll name one offense in 2025 that is underrated and could bring us fantasy gold.
Yeah, I've talked about them. I've talked about some of their pieces before, but I don't think I've ever talked about them collectively as a group. So here's their time to shine. I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there's a few reasons why. One of them, I know I've talked about this before on the show, is the Liam Cohen. They bring him in as the head coach, and seeing what he was able to do with that Tampa Bay offense, brings me a lot of joy for Jacksonville and the pieces that they already have, and plus what they've added. So I think, Brian Thomas obviously had a great year last year. They bring in Travis Hunter, so another pass catcher. That's a massive upgrade from Christian Kirk. Even if Hunter doesn't play the wide receiver snaps that we want him to, any wide receiver snap that Travis Hunter will play is better than what Christian Kirk was given.
Oh, easily.
So that's a great 1-2 punch for Jacksonville. We've talked about Trevor Lawrence and the crazy amount of hype he's had coming into the league, and he's had some flashes, but nothing consistent enough over a whole season where you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense why he was the number one overall pick. But I think Cohen can bring out the best in him. Running backs, Travis Etienne, 2023 had a great season, and last year was just a complete dud. And I because of what he's displayed on the field in years past, last year I feel like was a fluke. And just a down year in general. I don't think it has anything to do with, the talent that he still has. And Tampa Bay had a great rushing attack last year. I think Cohen can bring that to Jacksonville. And they did it with two guys, so I think Etienne and Bigsby can make that happen for him.
Yeah.
I think as a collection, they made it a point to go up and get Travis Hunter, which I think is huge for his value. And they've had pieces already. This isn't like they were a bunch of nobodies last year, and this is a fresh new group. Like, they've had these pieces for a couple years now. So I'm really excited to see what Liam Cohen can do with these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all falls on the shoulders of Trevor Lawrence. I think this year is the kind of make or break year for him, and if he can't get it done with the collective group of guys, I think you got to move on if you're Liam Cohen.
And thankfully Lawrence has been in the league long enough now to where he's like I don't want to say veteran, but when it comes to the pieces that I just named, he's the veteran guy of that group.
Oh yeah, easily.
So when it boils down to him having a good year, I think him having those extra years of experience, already being in the league, I think that it boosts my confidence more.
Yeah, I'm curious because he's down there. I was looking at ADP for Trevor Lawrence right now, 1209.
Yeah.
But listen, like if things work out, like that's a huge steal, like, for ADP. If you get him at the 1209, like that's great.
When I'm in a dynasty startup right now, we're in the middle of it, and he went at the 506.
Yeah.
Like he went behind JJ McCarthy, he went behind Cam Ward, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy. So this is a prove-it year for him for sure.
Absolutely. So my pick for a underrated offense to bring us fantasy gold, I'm going Los Angeles Rams. And again, same situation. Not necessarily the same situation, but it still kind of falls on the quarterback. Does Matt Stafford have another year to prove it to us that he is, can provide, fantasy output for all of these options? Because if you look at it very sneakily, like, there's some elite options here. Obviously we know Puka. If Puka stays healthy, he's easily a top 5 guy. Yeah. And I'm banking on it, and I'm hoping on it, and I think Puka's going to get. Bet. Yeah, I think he's going to give us some great numbers this year. You always have Kyren Williams, who is like a consistent guy that I want to say they gave him way more touches than I thought.
I think he's also immune to the touchdown regression stat, because
and
the man is just a touchdown machine.
And that was the other thing. Like there was a point during the year where you could bank on Kyren Williams getting you an anytime touchdown. Like that was the greatest bet I could have during the year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Kyren had 301 rushing attempts, which that put him fifth out of all running backs. Sorry, 316. He was third out of all, behind Saquon and Derrick Henry. He had the
pretty
most.
Good company.
So you have the volume in him, and he produces. And now Devontae Adams comes in, and it's like, wait a minute, like I know Cooper Kupp wasn't what he was, but like I think Devontae Adams, even though he's older than Kupp, still has it, and is going to be a great receiver opposite to Puka Nacua, who's going to take some eyes off, because you have to respect Devontae Adams. He's that dude, and always has been. And then we talk about a sneaky play who kind of came on late last year and was always kind of talked about in the offseason is Jordan Whittington. Jordan Whittington was like getting all the buzz coming out of Texas. I believe he was a 5th round or a 6th round pick. And he slowly kind of worked into the offense. A lot of people thought he was going to be that year's Puka, per se. But he wasn't like Puka amazing, but he stepped in and carved out a role. And I think going into this offseason, he's definitely the number 3 wide receiver. Let me just check the depth chart to see. Puka, Tutu Atwell's still there, but like I can see him still beating out Tutu Atwell for the slot role. And then the last person I want to talk about that could be, an underrated player is Terrence Ferguson. Yep. Terrence Ferguson. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yes, Higbee's on the roster, Parkinson's on the roster, but they didn't produce anything like that. Terrence Ferguson was a highly talked about tight end coming out of this. I think after like the big 3 of Warren, Loveland, and Fannin, like he was the next one up there that, people were talking about and saying that, very skilled, highly talented. And he very well could make his way into the starting role come to the beginning of the year, if not definitely towards like the mid-season point. So you have options galore, but again, back to the top of my point, I think it all depends on what version of Matthew Stafford are you going to get. Are you going to get the Matthew Stafford who can facilitate this, or are you going to get the Matthew Stafford that's going to struggle throughout the season? Because if you get that, then this means nothing.
Right.
But if he's what he was or what he is, then could be very interesting for the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I like this pick a lot, and I'm sure I've said it so many times that people listening are going to know exactly what I'm about to say right now, but it all comes back to Sean McVay. And anytime you have him as a part of your team, he has the track record.
Bet on it.
So yeah, I'm in on that. I still think we can get 2 good years out of Stafford. I'm really curious to see when the Rams start to look past Stafford and say, okay, now we have to make a decision here. I would like to think that they would bring in a young guy sooner rather than later, if they can give him a year to sit behind Stafford.
Right.
And then if Stafford is kind of falling off a cliff, you can bring him in and be comfortable with it. But I do like the pick a lot.
Yeah, the only guys that they have on roster for quarterbacks is Jimmy Garoppolo and Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Those guys are definitely not the future.
I was really hoping they took someone late this year.
Like Dart or Milroe.
Yeah,
that was
Milroe for sure.
That would have been awesome. That would have been awesome.
Well, I can only dream.
Right. But we're going to move into some news that's happening around the league.
So sick of this guy.
We're gonna kick it off. So news broke a couple of days ago. We're recording on a Sunday, but Aaron Rodgers, has informed the Steelers he's going to fly to Pittsburgh on Friday. He's going to sign, and he's going to be at the next week's minicamp. So minicamp actually starts tomorrow. So as of now, Rodgers is signed. He's officially a Pittsburgh Steeler. Right? Yep, he signed a 1-year deal. I don't know what the money was for that, but
should be $1.
We can find that later. But it's official. Will Aaron Rodgers is a Pittsburgh Steelers? What's your take?
Well, first off, I'm going to say Week 1. Everyone, close your eyes really quick. Let's dream together.
All right, I'm doing it with you. I'm here.
All right, here we go. Close your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
It's Week 1, September 7th, 1:00 on a Sunday. We're in the beautiful East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Hot.
MetLife Stadium. It's real hot. It's like 90 degrees, sun shining. We get the New York Jets against Pittsburgh Steelers. 1:00 to kick off the season. Your boy's gonna be in the seats. Boots on the ground.
Losing it.
Oh, I'm going to be losing it because Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have the worst day of your life. I hope you're ready for it. It's going to be living hell out there for you.
Yep. Yeah, so Rodgers signed a 1-year, $13.6 million deal to be the quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Initial thoughts when I look at this, huge for DK Metcalf. I have DK Metcalf in 2 leagues. So the Dynasty League that we just had and we were talking about it. I know you were talking that was kind of a head-scratching move. I put my chips in, thinking it was going to be Rodgers, and I think it's going to pay off for DK Metcalf. So that's a huge bonus. I think sneakily who this helps out also is Caleb Johnson. I'm slowly rising on Caleb Johnson on he's going to be the workhorse dude in that backfield this year. You know what I mean? They have Warren on the roster, but Warren's not a guy who can take 250 to 300 carries, you know what I mean, in a season.
And Caleb Johnson was a second-round pick, right?
I believe he was a 4th.
Oh, why did I think he was earlier than that? And continue with what you're saying.
No, that's okay. Point. So, now you have a competent passing offense, and so that kind of, you don't have to load the box up, because what I was expecting was, the Steelers were going to have to do these slugfests out with teams like 13 to 10 wins and things like that. But now you have Rodgers, who hopefully I don't even know how old he is now, 50 years old, we'll call it 41.
Yeah.
But hopefully he can still spread the ball out, and then they don't have to load the box up on Caleb Johnson, and that's a huge bonus for him.
Yeah, I listen. I know I'm a D1 Aaron Rodgers hater, so let me take my biased hat off and actually talk about this seriously. This was best case scenario for Pittsburgh and all of the weapons that they had. I agree with you that this is huge for DK Metcalf.
It kind of feels like this was planned, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like this was planned?
Yeah, I was listening to something with Mike Florio, and he was basically saying that Pittsburgh just had to accept that this was their best option, so now they have to play the Aaron Rodgers game and kind of just let him run his course of, taking up media attention and saying he didn't have a decision, but he actually did. So Pittsburgh basically had to buy into the fact that we have to sit here and wait until he says yes.
I think he totally did it because he didn't want to do OTAs and all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly. But
this is best case scenario for Pittsburgh. He wasn't bad last year. He was pretty.
No, he was actually pretty. He was pretty good.
Exactly. So I think that I think he can provide enough for DK to be very fantasy relevant. I agree with you on the Caleb Johnson point. And my point with Jalen Warren was he's been around a couple of years now. If they were actually very confident in him, I don't think they would have taken Caleb Johnson when they did.
Right.
So
could be valuable in the passing game though. You know what I mean? With the dump offs from
that was the
Rodgers.
one thing I was going to be nervous about, is if that's going to eat into Caleb Johnson being a true workhorse guy.
Very true.
At least off the bat.
Very true. So, John, Zach, welcome to the Aaron Rodgers game. You guys are going to have a great time. We'll be checking in on both of you as the season goes on.
Yeah, expect your mental health to decline exponentially.
Speaking of another team's mental health declining, James Cook, Pro Bowl running back for the Buffalo Bills, is, quote, disconnected from the team. So Pro Bowl running back James Cook has, quote, disconnected himself from the organization and city, put his house up for sale amidst the contract disputes. Cook, who is entering the final year of his 4-year, $5.8 million rookie deal, is seeking an extension worth $15 million per year and has been absent from OTAs after negotiations were discontinued. Quote from Adam Schefter, quote, "You've got a guy who's unhappy with his contract situation. He's basically disconnected himself from the organization and the city, put his house up for sale. I don't think we'll be seeing him in Buffalo anytime soon." This is scary.
Did you say that he wants $15 million a year?
$15 million a year is what he's looking for.
That would be more than Jonathan Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, James Conner, A lot more than a lot of dudes.
Yes.
Who, I don't know if I put James Cook in the same conversation as them. So, you know, I don't hear Bijan complaining about his contract. He's making $5 million a year.
Nope. Believe me, I'm all for dudes getting their money and all that stuff, but like you got to be realistic. Yeah. James Cook, like not for nothing, you've been in the league now for 3 seasons. You had your best season last year with 16 touchdowns. The 2 years before, you only had 2 rushing touchdowns. Like we gotta be realistic here. You know what I mean? Like especially, I know we talked about it during one of our quick questions, you know, of someone who we expect to like who's overhyped. Like James Cook was easily an overhyped guy that you know people were banking on, or where he was in rankings, you know, based off of his season of having 18 total touchdowns, because he did have 2 receiving, but like we say it all the time here, touchdowns aren't a sticky stat.
Nope.
Like you can't bank on that. And I want to say it was like 41 to 43% of his fantasy points were on touchdowns. Like that's not sustainable. And you're looking for 15 million a year. Like no thanks. The Buffalo Bills have a running back one. His name is Josh Allen. Yeah. Like, you know, you're great and all, James Cook, but like they don't necessarily need you.
Yeah, the $15 million number is crazy, and it honestly it has nothing to do with my thought on his talent. But when you're looking at the rest of the market for running backs, like Derrick Henry makes $15 million a year. Sure, they're in completely different, you know, parts of their careers.
Yep.
But then McCaffrey makes 19 and Saquon makes 20. Like he doesn't sniff that conversation.
No, it's kind of crazy. So, what are you doing right now if you're a James Cook dynasty manager?
Panicking a little bit, you know, because I didn't know about this until you told me about it today. So this is like, you know, initial reaction. I'm like, this is a problem. I mean, I know there's always contract disputes and people do rash things, and then, you know, most of the time I feel like it all kind of works out and everybody kind of gets what they want. But I don't know if he's going to get that $15 million.
No, he's going to have to come down. He
exactly,
has to,
and I'm going to say it's going to have to be around like 10,
right?
Maybe 10, like 12 if you're lucky. But if I'm a James Cook manager, I think even without this news, I would be looking to move on anyways, try and get as much value as I could. But I think especially with this news, it's raising some flags here, and I would make him available and see if there's anybody
who's willing to bite on that. Yeah. I was just looking at running back ADP. So Cook right now is going at the 401. And I'm just going to read I'm not even going to read the guys before, but the guys after. Would you rather have James Cook or this person? Would you rather have James Cook or Ken Walker III?
Kenneth Walker.
James Cook or Alvin Kamara?
Alvin Kamara.
James Cook or Joe Mixon?
Joe Mixon.
Ooh. James Cook or Omarion Hampton?
Is this redraft?
This is redraft.
I'll say for this year, James Cook.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It could easily be Hampton.
Yep. And then last one, James Cook or Chuba Hubbard?
I like Chuba a lot, man. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Both Hampton and Hubbard are going at the 411 right now.
Those last couple names I would think about a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I don't know.
It's scary hours out here if you're.
It just felt like James Cook, like they would just get to the goal line and that's who he would score.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like he was breaking off big touchdowns like Saquon.
Correct. So it's not like he's gonna, you know, they can put someone else in. Like, so alert. If you're somebody in a dynasty league right now and you check your waiver wires and someone like Ray Davis or Ty Johnson are available, you go and scoop them up.
And that's the other thing. James Cook is really not involved in the passing game. And that's really just not Buffalo's game to begin with.
No, they don't incorporate the running backs at all. So, you know, we'll be on the lookout. We'll give you any updates if we see any on James Cook. But we're going to move into the main topic of the show today, ladies and gentlemen. So the main topic of the show is we're doing AFC Offseason Recap. So how this is going to work is we're going to go through each AFC team by division. We're going to talk about their key additions through free agency and also the draft, their key departures, and then who we think is the most impactful fantasy addition for that team. You know, we'll go through all the teams, and then once we get through each division, we have some accolades. So we'll talk about maybe who had the best offseason, who had the worst offseason, and then what player out of that entire division has the biggest fantasy impact. So we're going to kick it off with the AFC East. And as I go through this, you know, most of these additions, because I just kind of pulled them from the internet, are non-fantasy related. A lot of defensive players and things like that.
Yeah, this is a big defensive free agency.
Yeah,
and a pretty big defensive draft too, I would say.
Absolutely. So I'll try to highlight most of the fantasy relevant things, even though that there were some big defensive moves, and sometimes we may talk about it. Like I know when we get to Baltimore, that one is definitely going to be a topic of conversation, but we're going to try to keep it fantasy centric. So kicking off with the AFC East, your division winners, the Buffalo Bills. So some additions that they had over the offseason, Joey Bosa, wide receiver Josh Palmer. They extended Josh Allen and also Greg Rousseau. Some additions that they had were in the draft were mostly defense, Maxwell Harrison, TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, and then some key departures that they had were Khair Elam, Mac Hollins left, Amari Cooper's gone, and Von Miller. And then as kind of went through this, the most impactful fantasy addition, is probably Josh Palmer.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, just kind of talking about, first with the, fantasy edition of Josh Palmer, I think he's someone who's sneakily going to, eat into the target share of, those wide receiver room. I think Shakir, and we've talked about how safe his floor is, that, that's great. But I think if I'm someone who has Keon Coleman, like I'm kind of nervous with Josh Palmer coming into town. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Will?
I almost wonder because, was Keon Coleman wasn't a first round pick, was he? Was he like early second?
He was, I want to say he was early second.
So I think with bringing Josh Palmer, I wonder if I think it could be two things. It could be they're not sold on Keon Coleman. They're still a little nervous on his progression so far.
Sure.
Or they're using Josh Palmer as a way to help develop Keon Coleman, and you bring in a receiver who's been around the league a little bit now, understands the process of in and out of each season and your workout regimen and things of that nature. So I think it could be both ways. I think I more lean towards helping the development of Keon Coleman because Josh Palmer's not going to be somebody who comes in and lights the world on fire and all of a sudden Keon Coleman's irrelevant.
Yeah.
There's just no way that happens. I think the talent levels are different, and Keon Coleman obviously has a higher ceiling just because we've only seen 1 year of him.
Yeah.
But I think Josh Palmer can be somebody who, it'll eat into some of that target share. It's just how it works. But we've talked about this in the past, with other situations, how you bring in another receiver and sure, it might eat into the massive volume at first, but I think it improves the quality of targets that other receivers will see. So I think Shakir is still going to have that safe floor. He'll have his big games, but he'll have his pretty standard 8 to 10 fantasy points. Maybe he scores a touchdown or whatever the case is. But I think it can help Keon Coleman if they use Josh Palmer down the field and they try and get Keon Coleman involved more in the intermediate game and not so much use him as a deep threat.
Yeah, I was just referencing my projection sheet as I was kind of going through each team, and I had I bumped up Shakir. Shakir kind of was averaging around 10% target share. I know he had a jump last year, but I gave him a bigger jump this year at 20. Keon Coleman had an 11% target share this year or last year, and I kind of did the same this year. And Palmer I have as a 14% target share. So it's gonna be tough to fight for targets, and you also have to think about you and I both are high on Dalton Kincaid. You know what I mean? So
that's another name.
If Kincaid takes a step forward too, then that's even less targets. So in these projections, I have Coleman averaging about 3.2 targets per game, which could be a little bit tough. But again, positive wise though, I think it's bringing in Josh Palmer is a positive for Josh Allen, you know what I mean? Just because it's an additional piece to incorporate in the passing game, and who's kind of shown as a reliable target, before in Josh Palmer. So we'll kind of have to see how that goes. But we're going to move on to the Miami Dolphins. Key additions, really, as I'm looking over them, not really big. The only big key addition I really talk about is Ollie Gordon, and that's pretty much who we have as an impactful fantasy addition is Ollie Gordon. I'm slowly starting to kind of see the vision for him. We were high on Ollie Gordon, I know, in the pre-draft process, and he was the 2023 Doak Walker Award, which is the nation's best running back, and kind of fell off the face of the planet in 2024. But we felt as though it wasn't his fault, and still could get some high draft capital. He ended up becoming a 6th-round pick for the Dolphins.
NFL didn't see it that way.
They didn't see it that way. You know what I mean? So you have to kind of react to how the NFL does. But in this situation, I see him as the, early down back, you know what I mean, in Miami, if he's able to beat out like Jalen Wright, who we didn't see much of or didn't prove us much.
Yeah.
And the other guy, Alexander Madison, who's basically washed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so he could maybe eat into that goal line early down role and see some fantasy, gold. I don't know about you. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he could definitely see some in between the numbers touches. Obviously love Devon Achane, but he's not the biggest guy. He's not going to
No.
be a bruiser, so they do need someone who can fit that role.
And they tried it
that.
last year too.
Yeah.
When Tua was out and they had to kind of change the offense around, they tried to put Achane between the numbers, and it really, like, he was very inefficient. Like, he's his most efficient when you get him out in space or you get him in the slot. So maybe this is something that helps that. You know what I mean? It's a more beneficial for Devon Achane in the future too.
Sure. And then another rookie that they brought in that I want to talk about and kind of pose a question here. So they draft Quinn Ewers. I forget if it was the 6th or the 7th round. Yeah. I know it was one of the last few. It was on the last day. Is Miami drafting Quinn Ewers there? Is that we're a little nervous about Tua? Or is that, hey, this guy was supposed to be one of the top QBs in this draft, didn't have a great pre-draft process and kind of fell down the rankings, and we think there's something, at least something there that, we shouldn't be leaving him on the board in the 6th, 7th round.
Well, you know how I feel about Quinn Ewers. When we were doing the pre-draft, process, he was my lowest ranked quarterback out of all the guys we scouted, and I wasn't really high on him. Potentially that could be a thing, but the other thing you got to realize too is that they signed Zach Wilson in free agency too, and I think currently right now, I know you're. He's a former Jet and you don't like him, but I think
flashbacks.
He's better. He's better than Ewers currently right now. Ewers can always get better because he's young. You know what I mean? And Wilson's been there, so you know what you get from Zach Wilson. But I think, and I'm looking right now on our lads for depth chart. They have Zach Wilson ahead of Quinn Ewers in the depth chart. But I don't know. It could be a potential thing. You know what I mean?
I just think it's like when he's sitting there on the board. Is it like we were looking for a quarterback and this guy's kind of sitting there, why not take him? Or is it like, this guy's fallen for a while now, he was a name that had a little bit of buzz pre-draft, like, why should we just take like best available?
Yeah.
Is it that kind of route?
That's what I'm thinking is they just went the best available in that situation, and it kind of fell to them. Moving on to the New York Football Jets. Key additions, so we got some additions here, right? Fantasy wise, Justin Fields is now the starting quarterback. Right? That's a huge one. Obviously in the draft they went with their first round pick, an offensive tackle, which is huge for other fantasy pieces that are there. But then they also drafted Mason Taylor, who seems like far and away is the starting tight end for the Jets. I don't know. Well, you're my resident Jets fan. Is he the starting guy, or is he gonna have to?
Ruckert's had his opportunity. I think they both get some work here, but I think Mason Taylor's the better athlete. And can have a higher ceiling. Fields definitely the biggest fantasy impact here, but I do want to mention the Jets' offensive line as a unit as an impactful, fantasy adjacent, I guess we could say, because I think it's going to help Brees a lot. And I still don't know what the deal is with this. Is it going to be a split backfield? Is this still Brees' backfield? I think there's a lot of question marks there. I don't think there should be any question marks, but Glenn's brought up in the past that he wants it to be more of a committee, and if that's the case, whatever. But whatever running backs end up running for the New York Jets, the offensive line is a massive improvement. They add another tackle in the first round this year. They got Fashanu last year in the first round.
Yep.
And they've had Joe Tippmann under center for a couple years now, Elijah Vera Tucker at guard for a few years now, and John Simpson, who is the oldest one out of the five of them, and he's only 29.
Yep.
So I think this O-line can stick around for a while and be massively important for not only the running backs, but again, Justin Fields.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, also just to note, departures too, right? This is not that it's a completely looking, offense, but, Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams are gone. All right. And
you lose a lot of the spotlight.
Yeah.
I think that's good for this year.
I would agree. So for most impactful fantasy edition I put was Justin Fields. I think this season is going to have to move as Justin Fields does. If we see the Justin Fields that we did 2 years ago when he was the quarterback in Chicago, maybe this is an interesting offense. You know what I mean? And not to say that he wasn't bad last year, but he had limited opportunities. It felt as though he had a short leash in Pittsburgh. But, if Fields can go out and play, safe football, take care of the ball, not fumble as much or throw interceptions, and get it to the people he needs to. Essentially, it's really Garrett Wilson. I think it may be a might be a sneaky good fantasy team as a whole.
I think he's really interesting because you bring up the point last year where we had the short leash in Pittsburgh. I don't think that there's no leash in New York. I don't think Tyrod Taylor is much of a threat unless Fields like blows up and it's like really bad to the point where they actually have to think about Tyrod Taylor. But
correct.
I think at this point right now, it's like, listen, like Justin, go out and play the whole year. I think that's the mindset going in. And he had a QB1 week last year. He had a QB7 finish. He only played 6 games where he was, the full starter. And there was always that question in the back of everyone's mind. It was like, all right, when does Russell Wilson come back? Even though he was playing well, I think they went 4-2 in that stretch.
Yeah, they were really good at that time.
So even with him being 4-2, they still pulled out the rug from underneath them. So I think this year, not having that thought of all right, how much longer do I have here? No matter how well I'm playing, I think he can kind of go with the ebbs and flow of a season and be a lot more steady this year.
Right. And the thing too is I was just looking at his contract. So he signed a 2-year, $40 million contract. This year it's a base salary of $5 million, but next year it's $20 million he gets that year, and it's a cap hit of $23 million. So like regardless, he's there for the next 2 years for sure. Even if he plays poorly, I don't see them getting rid of him.
Yeah, I think Tyrod Taylor would be the name that leaves.
Right, exactly. And then they bring in maybe a rookie to compete with Fields, but I think Justin Fields is kind of, at least for the next 2 years, is sure-handed, like he's in that quarterback spot.
I think Fields can be really sneaky this year for redraft leagues. If you're waiting late on quarterback, I think he's a very good option.
I love that.
And then even in dynasty startups where it's super flex, I think he could be depending on when you take your first quarterback and who it is. Like if you want to wait, I think that's another good name to be a quarterback too. Like it's a name I'm considering right now in that draft I mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. Actually, now that I want to see what his ADP is for redrafts right now. Right now, his redraft ADP is the 11-12.
Yeah.
And he's going behind guys like C.J. Stroud, Dak Prescott, Drake May. He's going ahead of J.J. McCarthy, Trevor Lawrence, Tua. So I think some people are realizing that, if he gets the legs rolling, if he gets the legs going and he's a reliable passer, like just because of how broken fantasy is, I'm not saying that he is this, but he could be a top 10 fantasy option easily. Yeah. Easily.
Yeah, the legs are huge.
Yeah. We're going to move on to the next team in the AFC East, the New England Patriots.
Talk about defense.
Yeah, they defense heavy. I mean, offensive tackle in the offseason and a center, and obviously Stephon Diggs. And then, got some young guys in the draft, Travion Henderson and Kyle Williams, right? And then mostly their departures were, defensive players. So I put here for most impactful fantasy edition is not Stephon Diggs. I think it's either Travion Henderson or sneaky pick Kyle Williams. Yeah. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's go with Henderson.
Yeah. So, I mean, Henderson, it's the conversation that we've had before, right? Like Josh McDaniels is now the OC here in New England, and every reliable Josh McDaniels offense had a pass catching running back that was reliable, sure-handed, and was a great dump off. And I think depending on how obviously we talked about May being able to use his legs and things like that, but I think in this offense he's going to be expected to make those check downs and get 4 or 5 extra yards as opposed to him trying to grind it out and rush for some, and that comes to the benefit of Travion Henderson. But Travion Henderson, great running back out of Ohio State. Shared the backfield with Quinshon Judkins, so he's not anyone who's new to having to share a backfield with Ramondre Stevenson. But I also think that come maybe even before the midseason point, like he may just take over and be the everything guy for this offense.
Travion Henderson screams James White for me, and that's what I was looking up here. His fantasy finishes. James White was the running back 6 in 2018, and listen to these numbers. So rushing attempts, he had 94 rushing attempts for 425 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was 4.5 per carry on the ground. Receiving wise, 123 targets, 87 receptions for 750 yards and 7 touchdowns.
Right.
Like I think that's the path here.
Yeah. I mean, but
for now,
correct. And Tom Brady is also not the same athletically as Drake May.
Sure.
And I wonder if it's. And that's my question is Drake May going to turn into that stationary statue guy that is forced to do those check down or those dump offs, or is he going to try to attempt to do it with his legs? Because if he does, obviously we think Travion Henderson's talented enough to overtake Ramondre Stevenson, so he doesn't lose that value. But, he may not see the 123 targets that James White saw, in that 2018 year.
I've heard the Drake May, running the ball, is that going to impact Henderson? I've heard that argument before, and to be honest, it doesn't really bother me. Last year, May had to get out of the pocket a lot. He had no time behind the offensive line. He had to make things happen on his own. And the kid doesn't know how to slide.
No.
He doesn't. You just get rocked every time.
Close.
So Vrabel's way too smart to not go up and say, listen, you want to be this franchise quarterback, you have to be able to be available and not be hurt and play these games. So they're either going to teach him how to slide or just going to tell him to stop doing it, because he wouldn't. I love the wanting to make the extra effort to pick up an extra yard or two. I love that. It fires up your guys. But when you're trying to be the franchise's next guy, at some point you need to have a range of outcomes there when it comes to that. Is it really worth it right now? So the rushing is there. I don't think it's going to hurt as much as people think. Yeah.
And the other guy I want to talk about, at least give some light to him, is Kyle Williams, rookie wide receiver from Washington State. Have already heard great things coming out of OTAs for him. He's starting to shine and kind of take that step into the starting role. And we've already seen footage of Javon Baker and Jalen Polk not being up to snuff. Stephon Diggs are talking about he might not even be ready until week 4. So this is a perfect opportunity for someone like Kyle Williams to step in, take that kind of wide receiver 1 spot, or 1B to Demario Douglas, and see what he got, what he has. I think he's a sneaky value. I think there was a lot of buzz on him in the rookie draft process, but if I'm you, I would check your dynasty waivers and just see if he's chilling out there.
Yeah, we've talked about him before and saying how if there's any team where he could carve an opportunity out for him, it's New England, because after Diggs, and you just said he might not be ready till week 4. There is absolutely an avenue for anybody on this team. Whether it's Kyle Williams or not, there's just not enough dudes there, solidified in a role to where it's he really has to fight for it. He could have a solid offseason, nothing crazy, and he can easily, carve out a path for himself.
Absolutely. And for those of you guys who have not heard about Kyle Williams, 5'11", 190 pounds, senior from Washington State, ran a 4.4 in the draft combine.
Yeah, that boy quick.
He's quick. He's got speed. And at Washington State last year, 70 receptions, essentially 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. So Dude can play some ball, you know what I mean? So
it's a name to follow.
I'm excited to see, if he and May can build that connection. But so to round out the AFC East, for best offseason, you and I have, the pick. I think the Patriots had the best offseason in this. Worst offseason was easily Miami. I think they didn't address nearly as much as they should have in the offensive side of the ball. They definitely addressed it defensively, which, you can't hate on a team for that. And then biggest impact, I have Travion Henderson, just because of his being able to be relevant in the rushing and in the passing game, I think is huge. And then you also have Henderson, but you put Fields in too.
Yeah. So let me get this out here. The biggest fantasy impact is absolutely Travion Henderson, but just so we're not sitting here talking about the same people over and over, I do want to throw Fields in just because of the late round value that he can add for your team. If you want to, like I said, in the redraft, if you want to wait on quarterback, and you said he was the 11th pick or something, or 1209. So yeah, if you want to sit and wait on a quarterback and redraft, I think Field would be a great pick. Again, in dynasty startups, if it's a super flex, and you take a top tier quarterback and now you want to fill out some other positions and take another one late, I think Fields is a great option there. But Henderson is going to have the biggest fantasy impact. He's a part of this rookie running back class that we've talked about that could be generational in terms of changing the landscapes of running backs, not only in the league but also in fantasy. So it is Travion Henderson for sure, what he can do both running the ball and passing the ball, but Fields would be my second option here.
Yeah, I would agree. So we're going to move into the AFC North, and we're going to kick it off with the Baltimore Ravens. Their key additions really, we talked about at the top, is especially in the draft, defense. They did re-sign Ronnie Stanley, which is huge, and Derrick Henry, which is all equally as huge, and then added, DeAndre Hopkins in free agency. And, so really with all those defensive moves. And this, DeAndre Hopkins is easily the most impactful fantasy addition. My question for you, Wu, for DeAndre Hopkins is, if you're a Zay Flowers manager, are you nervous with DeAndre Hopkins in the building?
Nope, that's the biggest no ever. I think we've said it on this show, like, wide receivers go to the Ravens to die.
Yeah.
So
we are correct.
It's probably a wrap.
Yeah. So, so really not a huge amount of, for fantasy at least, so, with the Ravens, it's going to be kind of the same guys as last year. It's going to be a lot of Henry, Lamar. I don't think we see, Lamar have as crazy passing numbers as he did last year, but if he can get somewhat close to that, and Zay Flowers can take a step, because we know Mark Andrews is getting older. If Zay Flowers can kind of take a step into that wide receiver one kind of role, it could be, beneficial for him.
Agreed.
So moving into the AFC North even more, Pittsburgh Steelers, for key additions, we just talked about them. Aaron Rodgers is now in town. DK Metcalf they acquired in a trade, and Jalen Warren they re-signed, which was big. Key additions in the draft were Caleb Johnson, and then obviously they lose Wilson and Fields, and then Pickens was a part of that trade in Dallas. I don't think they only got picks out of that one, right? They didn't get any players.
I don't think any players.
Yeah, so I think it was like pick swaps or something like that. But so I put here for most impactful fantasy addition was, it's got to be Aaron Rodgers, unless you think it's Metcalf, and I'm willing to have the discussion.
I'd almost say Caleb Johnson.
Really?
Yeah, but when we're talking about impact, Rodgers impacts the entire offense.
Correct.
Rather than just one position, so I get Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, that was why I put Aaron Rodgers, because he affects everything as a whole. Because if he's bad and they start to lean on the offense, or on Caleb Johnson being the the running back, they're just going to load the box up because they know that Aaron Rodgers can't throw the ball. So it really falls on his shoulders. Is he going to be the Aaron Rodgers where last year for the Jets he was somewhat reliable? I think he had 3,800 passing yards.
Yeah.
So like if we can get that, then all of these ancillary pieces with Metcalf and Johnson and Warren can actually bring some fantasy relevance. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, buckle up, Steelers fans. That's all I'll tell you. Having Aaron Rodgers on your team, it's a crazy drug. It makes you say things you don't actually mean. So just buckle up and get ready. It'll be a ride. It'll be fun. It'll be sad. So just be ready.
We'll see. Moving into the Cincinnati Bengals, who finished third last year. Key additions really were absolutely nothing. This one's a quick one. They re-signed Chase, or they took Chase to an extension. They re-signed Higgins. And then in the draft, they went absolute defense because that's all they could afford.
Yep.
So really for fantasy impact or most impactful fantasy addition, there really is nobody. I know that they took a 6th or 7th round running back. I can't remember who it was currently at this time, but I don't expect him to eat into the workload of Chase Brown that much. So that's kind of why we sat here and we put nobody.
Yeah, really not a ton here for Cincinnati. It's about time they pay their guys. That's pretty much all I have.
Absolutely, and we'll see what they got.
Taj Brooks was the Cincinnati.
Taj Brooks, that's who it was. Yeah, but I don't expect a lot out of Taj Brooks this season.
No.
Last team of the AFC North, Cleveland Browns. For additions, really. Kenny Pickett, they got through a trade. They signed Joe Flacco, and then in the draft,
Might be the best draft.
Yeah,
they're up there.
Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Gabriel, Shadur Sanders for offensively. Obviously, Mason Graham, who was like a top 5 pick, and then losing people. I think the Jedrick Wills loss is going to be big.
It's crushing.
But here, most impactful fantasy addition, I think, is far and away
it's not even close.
Quinshon Judkins. I think we've talked about it here before. Like in redraft, he's almost maybe Caleb Johnson's safer, but I think out of the rookie running backs, he's the safest running back that you could take out of Hampton, excluding Genty because Genty's on like another planet.
Sure.
But out of Hampton, Judkins, Johnson, and Henderson, he's the safest dude that you can get because there's no there's no one to really compete.
They're giving him
for touches. They're giving him the keys, and he's gonna run with it.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does in Cleveland. I think not only this year, but just for his entire career. I can't wait.
He's someone like I think this year is going to be. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes it in the top 12 and finishes as an RB1, in that 12 to 10 range. But then that following season for dynasty and just for redraft, like he's easily going to be a top 5 dude. Like he has all the intangibles. You and I, we both loved him in, our pre-draft process, but like he just looks like and is built like an NFL running back, ready to just like smash through people.
Yeah, if I was ever going to be right about Quinshon Judkins and all the things I said pre-draft, like Cleveland is a spot for him to do it.
Yeah.
There's nobody there. It's all him. They had 2 guys there already and they were still willing to take them. They even took they took 2 running backs in this draft, but taking Judkins first on top of already having running backs there, I think that says like, here we go. Like this is your team.
Yeah. So when we're giving out accolades for the AFC North, best offseason, I put the Baltimore Ravens, but Woo, you have 2 picks here. You want to talk about best offseason?
I do. So I have the Bengals in there because they brought back their offense. They finally gave Chase the money, finally give Higgins the money. I respect those 2 moves. That's the nucleus there. Burrow, Chase, and Higgins. If you want to win games, that's what you have to do. They made some defensive additions. I'm not going to get into any crazy specifics because it's not fantasy related, but I think as a whole they did the things that they needed to. Were they long overdue? Yes. But it still matters that they did them. And then my other one is sneaky Browns. I think the Browns sneaky had a good offseason.
Yeah, you got to sell me on that one because outside of Judkins, like I love the Judkins pick. I'm still kind of like head scratched about like they have such a quarterback conundrum. It's not even funny.
They do have a quarterback conundrum, but they re-signed Garrett. They have quarterback options with Pickett, Flacco, Shador, and Dylan Gabriel.
Yep.
Yes, that's a mess. I'm not going to sit here and say that's a good look.
Like you got to think that. You draft Sanders and Gabriel, so you would assume that they're going to be on the roster, but like you can't carry 4 quarterbacks going into the so like immediately it's like Flacco or Pickett are like gone.
I think it goes Flacco, Pickett, Shador, Gabriel. I think that would be.
And you think they carry all 4 of them?
No.
Oh,
I'm saying at this moment in time, I think that's the order.
So then, who do you think kind of gets the boot in this situation?
I want to say Gabriel, but like based off draft capital, it doesn't make any sense.
Right, because it was
which is
third,
why I don't know why
round,
they
right?
even picked him in the first place. Yeah, he was a third round pick.
Yeah. Could it like it'd be so Browns for them to trade for Pickett
and trade him away,
or even just dump him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it'd be so Browns for that.
But I think like the re-signing Garrett is huge. The Judkins pick was I loved a lot. They moved back from the Travis Hunter pick, took Mason Graham, and I think they got a 2nd round pick next year on top of it.
I think they got a first.
If they got a 1st round pick, then it's even more. It might not even be sneaky Browns. I'm pretty sure it was a 2nd, now. But if it was a 1st, then it's not sneaky Browns. It's Browns. But I just think they were no matter who they took in this draft this year. Whether, let's say they didn't go the Dylan Gabriel and Shador route and they picked a quarterback that we all liked and they stuck to that one guy. They were not going to be a good team this year. They already have Judy, who's coming off a wide receiver 1 year in fantasy. Oh my God. What did they get?
This is crazy. So the Jaguars got the 2nd pick to select Travis Hunter. So the Browns traded the number 2 pick and their 4th pick and a 6th pick to the Jaguars, and they got the 5th pick. The Jaguars' 2nd round pick was just pick number 36, a 4th round pick, and a 2026 1st round pick. So they did get a 1st round pick in that trade.
Yeah, Browns. Come on, they made a lot of good moves, understanding that they're still not going to be a good team. There's still room for improvement here, and I think they know that. But they're slowly building the pieces around. The biggest thing is the quarterback right now.
Yeah. So moving on to worst offseason, this one's easy. Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
I will at least give them a bump, because they did solidify and secure Aaron Rodgers. But like, honestly, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you waited this long for Aaron Rodgers to be your starting quarterback, you knew
you were down bad from the start.
Yeah, you were down bad from the start. You should have addressed it way earlier. And I think also I love DK, but for where he is age-wise and what they paid him was a massive overpay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we'll have to kind of see how those 2 key pieces kind of play out.
I didn't understand that trade for either of them, to be honest, but that's a...
Oh, you're saying for the Seattle side and for the
I don't know why
Pittsburgh
Seattle
side?
moved on, and then for Pittsburgh to go out and get him without having quarter, it just didn't make sense.
I think Seattle moved on from him because they didn't want
to money.
Not the incoming money, but I think also like philosophically, they want to be a run it first kind of team.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be enough targets to go around for someone like DK, who also, when he doesn't get, enough targets, he turns into a diva. So like, you don't want to also deal with that. And they're probably better off, giving the most amount of targets to JSN and, Cooper Kupp.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of was why.
Yeah.
But going back to the AFC North, biggest fantasy impact, this one was easy. Quinshon Judkins. I already kind of gave you the take that where I think where he's going to be. So if you want to try to trade for him, you can. I don't know if anyone's willing to, just because they already got him in a rookie draft, but we'll kind of have to see how that goes.
I just took him in a startup, and I can't wait.
There you go.
Can't wait.
Moving into the second to last division of the AFC South. Starting off with the Houston Texans, key additions. They addressed offensive tackle after trading their offensive tackle, signing Christian Kirk, but the draft was kind of where the bigger fantasy pieces came. Both the Iowa State wide receivers, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, joined the team. And that's kind of where I start for, most impactful addition. So who do you think is more impactful year one, Jaden Higgins or Jalen Noel?
I like Jalen Noel, and it's because of something we've talked about on the show in the past, is based on their physical attributes and traits, where we know Nico's the one, and he's the bigger X receiver. And Higgins physically is very similar to that Nico build. So I just think, physically and, what the stereotype behind like NFL receivers and kind of what role they play, like I think Noel fits into that too much better than Higgins does.
Yep.
But again, we have to see what they do on the field. They could easily, Higgins could easily be that guy no matter how tall or how big he is. But I think Noel, it kind of just makes more sense in your head if what I'm saying makes sense.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm gonna hit you with the biggest switch up ever. I think it's Higgins.
Why? Okay.
So I was in the same boat as you. You know what I mean? Like, they play similar positions. He's gonna have to fight for targets. But when you think about it, like, if you put them on either side of the field, where Collins plays the X, Higgins plays the Y, and you just have two giant players to just hit, jump balls.
And they're gonna take out Nico first.
Correct, right? And so, Higgins may, carve out an insane role. And the other thing with Noel, which I love, and I've taken Noel in multiple places, I think he's a great wide receiver and is going to be a great slot role, but, he still has to compete with Christian Kirk, at least like Higgins, because let's be honest, Kirk's not playing on the outside. You know what I mean? He's going to play in the slot, and they just paid him, or they traded for him. So, they're going to expect him to get some touches, but so Noel has some competition like innately from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I'll check their depth chart for other outside receivers that are on the roster, but I don't think it's anyone crazy. So, because right now ourlads.com has Jaden Higgins posted as the right outside receiver, Nico's the left, and the starting slot receiver is Christian Kirk.
Okay.
John Mechie's the only other one, but John Mechie's been in the league for 4 years, and you kind of know what you got out of him. So, that was when I started to think about it that way. That's when I was like, oh, Higgins may be the more impactful one year one.
Sure.
I still think they're both great wide receivers, and I think Noel's going to have a great career. I just think year one, Higgins may have that more sustained, or I'm blanking on what it is, but he's going to have more fantasy value innately than Jalen Noel year one.
Yeah, I get that. I hear that. My biggest head scratcher with Houston this year was trading Laramie Tunsil. I thought that made no sense.
No, absolutely not.
I know he was like going for the record for like most holding penalties in the season last year. So, but you were so distraught at the performance of your offensive line, and you take your best one, you ship him out. To me, that makes no sense. But.
No, I would agree. And especially, they got Cam Robinson in free agency, who has been a reliable left tackle for I think it was Jacksonville, for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
So that would have been awesome, because if you slid him over to right guard, you kept Tunsil. Like, those are two bookend tackles that, you could actually work with and use. So we're going to have to see how the offensive line plays out in
it's
Houston.
Still a major issue.
Yeah, I was going to say, because if they don't shore these things up, then, I think Houston could take a big slide back, because if you're not giving Stroud enough time in the pocket to make these passes, he's got great receivers, and that was, the problem that they had last year was that
no time.
they never had Dell, Diggs, and Collins healthy for the majority of the season. They had one or sometimes two of those players because someone was always hurt, and they go to the draft, they automatically get two. They trade for Kirk, which I think is what do you have to lose? Because I think it was just a 6th round pick, so they have the weapons to really work with it, but like you don't address the offensive line, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, it's like tough. It's really tough to blame Stroud, especially with the rookie year that he had. But like last year was awful, and it really boils down to the offensive line play. He had no time to throw.
Right. So we'll see how that plays out. But moving in, next team we have the Indianapolis Colts. So key additions that they had both from free agency and the draft. Daniel Jones comes in to compete with Anthony Richardson, and then also Tyler Warren is essentially coming in to be the starting tight end for this team. Couple of key departures I do want to point out for this team, which is huge, is they lost their best offensive guard, Will Fries, and their center, Ryan Kelly, to free agency. I think they actually both went to Minnesota.
I think you're right.
But so that will be interesting to watch, especially on the Jonathan Taylor side of things.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And see how that goes. But, clearly the most impactful addition here is Tyler Warren. Last episode we talked about the tight end episodes, and I kind of gave a hot take where, I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see him kind of fall into the top 5 for tight ends, and just kind of go that Bowers route of, just always being open, or not always being open, but being the most reliable target in the offense, and just, kind of racking up receptions and moving the team down the field. But would you agree with that Tyler Warren's the most impactful addition for the Colts?
Definitely the most impactful. I've said I hate the situation so much, and I'm really hoping that he proves me wrong, because the pick happens. I hate the situation right away. Now we've had some time to think about it, and I still don't like it. I really hope he proves me wrong, because I was so high on him going into the draft. And I would hate to see the team that drafts him, like you don't see the full Tyler Warren that everybody was hoping. So I'm still shaky on the Warren thing. He is the most impactful in terms of the Colts this year, but I'm still shaky on the whole situation. I just really hope that I get proved wrong. That's pretty much all it is. Yeah,
and we'll have to see. And the other thing too, I just want to talk about is Daniel Jones. How many games do you think Daniel Jones starts?
I think you asked me this a few episodes ago, and I think I said 6.
Yeah,
and I think I still like that number. It could be higher though. I'm like maybe 8. I don't think I would go more than 8.
No more than 8?
No more than 8.
I just want to check my projections, see what I have him statted out at. I have him statted for 10 games.
Wow.
Yep, I have him statted for 10 and Richardson for 8. So
I'll go in the middle then. I'll say 7.
Okay.
7 for Daniel Jones. I'll move up 1. And I think 4 of them are because Anthony Richardson's hurt.
Yeah. God. Remember the hype on Anthony Richardson, and everyone was, and the Colts took him as a top 3 draft pick.
What is it with these like freak athletes coming out of Florida, man? That just can't, bring it to the
next
level.
Hey, listen, there's another. So I was looking on Instagram, kind of off topic, and someone who's not even relevant in NFL, but I saw a picture of Anthony Richardson standing next to DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway looks like a freak.
Really?
He looks like a freak. And I hope that DJ Lagway has an amazing season, and like he's a highly touted pick, because I love what I saw out of DJ Lagway last year.
Yeah, the couple Florida quarters that I caught last year, Lagway was it was pretty special.
Yeah.
It was pretty special.
So we'll have to see. Moving on, the second to last team in the AFC South was the Jacksonville Jaguars. Key additions, obviously, big one was Travis Hunter. Took him number 2 in the draft, and really outside of him, it was Diami Brown, who signed a crazy 1-year, $10 million deal, which was nuts in my opinion. But hey, listen, they needed to fill out the room. But out of their departures, they lose Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Brendan Sheriff.
That's a big loss.
So those are some big losses. Hopefully Patrick McCarry. I think Patrick McCarry was the former Ravens guard, so maybe it wasn't that big of a loss. But obviously when we get into the most impactful addition, it has to be Travis Hunter, because it all depends on how many meaningful wide receiver snaps he's going to get. You know what I mean? Is he someone who is hardly ever going to see the field as a cornerback, or is it going to be a split 50-50? Like, depending on how he moves or what they do with him is going to be, how the Jacksonville Jaguars kind of finish.
I think he would be great in the slot because of his capability that he had outside, and I think his ability to work outside while he was in college, I think that would help him greatly in the slot role in the NFL.
Oh, I would agree.
So it's not like he's coming in and he's only ever played slot and there's no kind of added levels to his game. So I think that would work really well, not only for Travis Hunter, but also for Jacksonville as a team. You keep Brian Thomas on the outside. He keeps doing his thing. He had coming off a great year. So yeah, I think Travis Hunter, his best case scenario for fantasy relevance this year would be ending up in that slot role.
I wonder if they also, because I'm just looking at his, or the Jacksonville depth chart, because they have Diami Brown right now as the right outside wide receiver. I wonder if Travis Hunter does a little bit of both. You know what I mean? Because I don't think it's going to be hard for him to outperform Diami Brown. So I maybe there is more opportunity for him at wide receiver. Because outside of them, the next people is they have our Parker Washington, Austin Trammell, who I've never heard of, and
like why can't
Joseph
Travis
Cephas.
Hunter be Chris Godwin in the situation? Chris Godwin might get why can't he be Chris Godwin? I think that would be perfect for him.
I would agree. So we'll kind of have to see how it plays out.
It's such an interesting.
Oh, I just really hope.
situation.
I know we talked about it last week with Travis Hunter's ADP, but I'm just again to go back to it. Like, he is drafted right now as. Can I not find him? Can't find him at the moment.
He got taken before Garrett Wilson in this startup.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me control F this.
You went in front of a lot of big names. You went in front of Bucky Irving. You went in front of Travion Henderson, Kyron Williams.
The 6'10", that's what it was. So he was going ahead of Rome Odunze, Khalil Shakir, Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
And he was going behind Jordan Addison, Jerry Jeudy, Tedero, and McMillan.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see. Moving into the last team of the AFC South, we have the Tennessee Titans. Key additions in the offseason, both through the draft and through free agency. Mostly free agency was, offensive line, which you like to see, and Tyler Lockett. And then the big addition obviously is Cam Ward, and he's my most impactful addition. We've talked about Cam Ward a lot through the pre-draft process. I think he was the best option that was there available, and they needed a quarterback so badly. And I don't hate Tennessee for the pick, but he doesn't have much to work with this year. But I think he's easily the most impactful, because is he going to be able to support these options, elevate them, and kind of keep Tennessee afloat, or is he going to have those rookie struggles that we see a lot of, first round picks have, and they don't really, they kind of spin the tires all year round.
Yeah, we definitely talked about how Ward was the only quarterback in this draft who we could confidently say could elevate the rest of these guys. This team's gonna go as Cam Ward does. I hope Callahan really takes his time here and puts every effort he has into developing Cam Ward, because the only chance he keeps his job.
I was just about to say, because if they crash and burn and Cam Ward looks bad, they're gonna ship Callahan out so fast,
and that's just only gonna hurt Cam Ward. We've seen this over and over and over, getting impatient with rookie quarterbacks. It's really frustrating, but it's where the league is right now.
Yeah, and so and I'm just looking, the wide receiver core he has to throw to is starting wide receivers, according to our lads, is Van Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett. Not a great group, but
it's really not. There
are some promising rookies that we did not mention, like Alec Iomaner, Chamir Dyke from Florida, and Xavier Restrepo, his college wide receiver. So if any of those options could step up to the plate and kind of break through, maybe that's enough to kind of keep them afloat.
And similar to the Patriots, there's avenues for those guys to break into this
room.
Sure. The depth chart for the wide receivers is not great.
Yeah. So rounding out our accolades for the AFC AFC South. Best offseason, I put no one really. There wasn't really anyone that I felt like blew my socks off. Like, wow, they had an amazing draft. Or amazing offseason. I liked Houston's, but I didn't like the Tunsil trade. Indianapolis, I think didn't really do much. Obviously outside of the Tyler Warren thing. The Jaguars got Travis Hunter, but didn't really get enough in my opinion. And then Tennessee, obviously Ward was just the big highlight. So I didn't feel like anyone had a great offseason. But who did you think, Will?
If anybody were to have a good one, I'm gonna go with the Jaguars. Going back to the top of the show, I like what they've done from top to bottom with the organization. They bring in a wonder boy for a general manager. I think he's in his 30s.
Yep.
And he, especially with that Travis Hunter trade, he's really leaning into that boy wonder, kind of title that the media has given him. Liam Cohen, love the addition there. Shout out Rhode Island.
Oh yeah, big shout out.
Again, still have Trevor Lawrence there. This is the year we need to see it from him. There's been flashes, there's been goods, but then there's been really bads. But they have a solid quarterback that they can work around here. I like what Liam Cohen did with the running game in Tampa Bay. I think they have the guys here to do it in Jacksonville. Love Brian Thomas Jr., what he did last year. Love what the possibility of Travis Hunter could be as a receiver. So I'm sticking with the Jaguars here.
Yeah, I actually had them as my worst offseason. Mm-hmm. Outside of Travis Hunter, I wasn't like I said before, I wasn't really impressed with what I saw.
Liam Cohen doesn't bump anything for you?
Yes and no. So listen,
I get it. Is a rookie head coach.
Shout out Rhodey. Love Liam Cohen. Love the representation. But did he really do anything crazy in Tampa Bay? Like all the pieces.
I mean, you saw what Baker did last year,
but
right?
all the pieces were there, and Baker did that 2 years prior. You know what I mean?
There's pieces in Jacksonville.
I see that, but they were a terrible offense last year. You know what I mean? And I granted I give it to Trevor Lawrence being hurt. Like I totally understand that, right? But when Liam Cohen was in Jacksonville, in Tampa Bay, everything was already there for him. You know what I mean? Outside of the addition of Bucky, who kind of we all felt like came out of nowhere. He's the best. He was the most impressive rookie running back last year. It's Baker, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and rinse and repeat. Like here, things actually have to develop. Like Lawrence has to stay healthy for 17 games. Travis Hunter has to be relevant in this offense in order for you to be good. Brian Thomas has to take a step forward. You know what I mean? Like there are so many question marks outside of in Jacksonville than there were in Tampa Bay, and I don't think they gave him enough, meaning Trevor Lawrence to I mean they do and they don't, right? Like and then we talk about losing Evan Ingram, right? We expect Brenton Strange to kind of step into the fold, which we haven't seen yet from him. It makes me weary. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, you're right. There was pieces in place in Tampa Bay. I think there's pieces in place in Jacksonville, not to the same level as Tampa Bay. But that's what happens when you become a head coach. Your responsibilities increase. Sure. Job gets harder. I think it's just part of the game.
Yeah. So, and then the last piece, biggest fantasy impact I had here was Higgins or Knoll. I'm leaning probably the Higgins side for this one. Who'd you have for the biggest fantasy impact?
I got Travis Hunter. The question marks are crazy. We keep going.
Wait, I skipped you over on worst offseason.
Oh, it was Houston.
My bad.
No, you're good. It boils down to the offensive line. I can't believe how bad they played last year, and that just wasn't the main focal point for this offseason. That's mind-numbing to me.
Yep.
But anyway, back to Travis Hunter. I think the question marks are crazy. We keep going back and forth on the show. What we think we're gonna get out of him, and when I think back to our pre-draft process and running through all the tape and on all the rookies, the stuff that Travis Hunter on tape as a receiver is nuts. And if that can somehow be showcased in the NFL, like watch out. Man.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Okay. All right. Last division. We saved the best for last over here. AFC West. We're going to kick it off with Kansas City. The Kansas City Chiefs, really the big additions that they had were offensive line, franchise tag Trey Smith, which was huge because I think he was a big he was going to get big money from somebody somewhere. And then in the draft, they took Josh Simmons, who was the offense tackle from Ohio State, was actually a popular name, but I think he had a torn ACL.
Yeah.
And key departures, they lose Joe Tooney in a trade to Chicago, and some defensive pieces. So not really much for the most impactful addition. The only one I will note for them is running back Brashard Smith, was rookie running back from SMU, who's getting a lot of buzz on Twitter for being a potential dynasty late round sleeper. He was a 6th round, 7th round pick. We know Kansas City is not shy to put that a 6th round or a 7th round pick in a featured role. Obviously see Isaiah Pacheco. So some people were kind of speculating if Pacheco kind of doesn't look like himself or has taken a step back, instead of going the Kareem Hunt route, they would actually go Brashard Smith.
Please, I'm sick of watching Kareem Hunt.
So that was the only really kind of addition of note for the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think as a whole, it's going to be, for them, storylines really is like the expectation of Rashee Rice coming back full strength, Xavier Worthy taking a step forward, and seeing what this offense can do. It's
not an addition, but the Rashee Rice news of him possibly not having to worry about this, legal trouble for a whole another year.
Oh my God, I would love it.
I think got hurt in week 4 last year, so he's had plenty of time to recover.
It was an LCL. It wasn't an ACL injury.
Yeah, he should be a full go for this year. The stuff that he was showing last year, that was going to be a wide receiver 1 year. Like, let's be real. So very excited for Rashee Rice if he can stay out of legal trouble again, and if that can gets kicked down the road and he's available to play this year, I think that's huge for them. But again, Kansas City, similar to Houston, we all watched that Super Bowl.
Yeah,
that offensive line was awful. Mm-hmm. It was the major issue. It was the same story as that Tampa Bay Super Bowl that they lost. And again, like, I love the Josh Simmons pick, but then you lose Joe Tooney in a trade. Like, yep. I feel like there's got to be more here for a team that just got embarrassed on a national stage in the Super Bowl when you had a chance to be the first NFL team to three-peat, and that was the major issue, and to not have more moves regarding the offensive line, to me, that's odd.
Yeah. Moving into the next team, the Los Angeles Chargers. So key additions through the offseason. Really, Mekhi Becton was a big one. Los Angeles struggled with another guard play, so they get Becton, who was on Philly, who won the Super Bowl. Najee Harris, that I felt as though Los Angeles kind of addressed the big needs on at least the offensive side, right? Like interior line play, you go and get Becton. Not reliable running game, you get Najee Harris, and then also in the draft, they take Omarion Hampton with the first round pick, who I said this before, I'll say it again. My 2 favorite players in the draft process went to my favorite team. Omarion Hampton and then Trey Harris in the second round. Like, those are going to be some key impact guys. And here I put most impactful addition. It's going to be Omarion Hampton. I finally had gotten to the Chargers woo when I was doing my projections. Mm-hmm. Would you like to take a guess on how many rushing yards I have Omarion Hampton for?
God, I'm gonna say it's north of 1,000 if that's the way you're gonna phrase the question.
It is north of 1,000.
I'll say 1150.
Close.
Okay.
1103. I got him at.
Okay.
1103. And I don't know how this happened. When I first did the projection and I let it run on its own without putting in touchdowns, they had him for 19 touchdowns, which would have been hilarious. So I had to be modest and put him down for 10. But I'll take myself out of this equation.
The excitement.
What is your expectation for Omarion Hampton this year?
This year, I think within the first 4 to 5 weeks, we will have a good idea of what Najee has left in the tank, where they are in terms of confidence in running Hampton out there as a rookie back. But they're going to run the ball. Opportunities are going to be there. If Hampton can have a strong training camp and rest of the offseason and show some promising things in those early weeks, I think Najee is going to be someone who has a short leash. And if Omarion Hampton's ready to go, they're going to throw him out there. They're going to run the ball. We know that's their identity. So Hampton's it'll be a fun watch, and I'm jealous of you.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think, and I love, obviously the dedication now that's going to be to the running game and things like that. What now concerns me a little bit is someone like Trey Harris and the passing game, because, that the problem when we were watching the Chargers last year was, they first 2 weeks, J.K. Dobbins was healthy and they were able to like give him, majority of carries. But once Dobbins was hurt and then was out, and Gus Edwards was not, old Gus Edwards, they had to kind of reform this offense, and it turned into a passing game. And that's where you see Lag got incorporated and Justin was throwing the ball a lot, but I guess I don't know if we see that this upcoming season, because now you have, not for nothing, even if you didn't draft Hampton and you rolled with Najee is leaps and bounds better than what you currently had with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Yeah. So you could give him the majority of carries and still be better than what you were last year. Now you add Hampton to the mix. I wonder how many passing attempts, I can see the passing attempts go down for the Chargers. I just don't know how much.
Yeah.
So,
for redraft though, Hampton, first year, little nervous. Still someone I'm keeping an eye on though, depending on where he ends up going and what kind of names are over there. It's a name I'll consider for redraft. Might be a little shaky. I still got to think about that. I'll be honest.
So we did this with Cook so he's going at the 411 right now. But guys, so would you rather have Hampton or Chuba Hubbard?
Chuba.
Hampton or James Conner?
Hampton.
Hampton or David Montgomery?
Hampton.
Okay. Would you rather have Omarion Hampton or Joe Mixon?
Joe Mixon.
All right. Yeah, Mixon goes ahead of him at the 410.
And when it comes to Mixon and Chuba, I know they are the guy week one right off the bat.
Absolutely. Moving on, the Denver Broncos, we look at their offseason moves. A lot of defense, but some
Rich got richer.
Yeah, Rich got richer easily, which I didn't realize they got Talanoa Hufanga.
Yeah,
he was that safety from
San
Fran. Oh my, Andre Greenlaw. Oh goodness. But key offensive additions: Evan Ingram, tight end from Jacksonville that they got. R.J. Harvey. Rookie running back from UCF, and then Pat Bryant, rookie from University of Illinois. And they lose Cody Barton, Zach Wilson, Javonte Williams in free agency, which aren't really kind of huge losses.
I think they're jumping for joy that Javonte Williams.
Oh yeah. So here I put for most impactful fantasy edition, I had either R.J. Harvey or Pat Bryant. So who would you like to discuss first, Will?
To me, it's Harvey. The draft capital is there. They've been in desperate need of a running game. They used a second-round pick on him. And from what I've seen, Sean Payton loves him. They were very happy. It sounds like they got their guy. Even if there were other names that are available, it sounds like that's who they wanted anyways.
Yep.
So I think that's huge in terms of...
Yeah, if you talk to Sean Payton, R.J. Harvey was number 2 behind Ashton Genty on his board.
Exactly. So I think those we've said, sure, we can sit here and have our opinions, but at the end of the day, you have to respect what these NFL teams are actually doing, because they're the ones who get paid to make these decisions for a reason.
Yeah.
So if Denver's confident in Harvey, then I have to have some sort of confidence, because they need help in the running game, and as of right now, it's his backfield.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I think the most impactful for this year is definitely R.J. Harvey, but I think in the long run, taking a bet on someone like Pat Bryant could pay off dividends for you. And the only reason why I say that is because, we know Sutton's, 29 years old. I think he turns 30 this year, right? Mims is the other starting outside receiver, really hasn't shown much. Devon Vele, and the other thing for Mims is 5'11", where Pat Bryant's 6'2".
Sure.
Devon Vele is, their slack guy. And then, obviously, some people were excited in the streets, were Troy Franklin fans, but didn't really show up. So, he's somebody who can step in, as Sutton starts to kind of taper off and hit, past that age 30, that age cliff, he may step into a role and then potentially be that number one receiver for, Bo Nix, who we both like,
I hear that.
So that long run wise, I just wanted to throw his name out so people were not unfamiliar. And again, kind of similar to Kyle Williams, as we talked about in the AFC East, check your waiver wire, see if Pat Bryant's out there, because if he is, I would grab him and stash him on your taxi squad.
Yeah.
Last team we're going to get into today of the AFC is the Las Vegas Raiders. Key additions in the offseason, really offensively wise. Geno Smith, which was a huge one. Got him in through a trade. And then key draft additions, Ashton Genty, Jack Betch, and were really kind of the big ones. But I put for most impactful fantasy edition, not Ashton Genty. I put Geno Smith.
I like this.
Similar to the Aaron Rodgers thing is, we know Genty's going to be great. Like there's not much that you're going to say, and he easily could be the most impactful guy because, it could be, load the box on him because he's so dominant, and then it opens it up for everyone else. But I think it's going to be Geno because Geno has to be a reliable, thrower of the ball, because if he cannot be reliable, similar to Aaron Rodgers, you just load the box up then, and you force Geno to throw the ball. He has to. He's got to be. I don't know, like he's got to be kind of around where he was, last year, like a 38. What'd you say?
In 2023?
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like consistent throw of the ball around like 3,800 yards, and being able to get the ball to, people like Bowers and Myers and Betch. Hopefully Betch, kind of steps into the fold, but, that's why I have Geno here.
He's got to take care of the ball this year. Last year, interceptions were a major issue.
Yes.
So if he really wants to get back to that 2023 impact that he had, that's what he's going to have to do, is limit those turnovers. But you're right. This team goes as Geno Smith does. Yes, Ashton Genty is the big sexy name. Going to be a top pick in a lot of drafts. He's going to be on the top of those boards, especially in Dynasty and rookie drafts especially. But his performance goes with Geno Smith. Brock Bowers' performance goes with Geno Smith. Jacoby Myers' performance goes with Geno Smith. So, and this is a massive upgrade from what they've had.
I was just looking at his 2023 versus 2024. He technically had a better 2024.
Did he?
Yeah, he was the quarterback 19 in 2023. This past year, he was the quarterback 12. He had last year was 4,321 touchdowns, 15 picks. I get the picks were bad, but 2 years ago he was 3,600 yards for 20 touchdowns and 9 picks. So if you can get like the best parts of both of those seasons, I think that'd be really good for the receiving pieces in Las Vegas.
I could not agree more.
Yeah. So then just to round it out, so our best offseason, Wu, I'll let you go first.
It's the Chargers.
Yeah, baby.
It was. Come on. I mean, not only did you sit here on this podcast and say that you love some of these rookies, then your favorite team goes out and gets them. Like, oh man.
Off-season of dreams.
Yeah, they addressed a running back issue that they had. J.K. Dobbins was great while he was there, but the injuries were there. Gus Edwards just not the juice that he had. So they go out and get a guy who has a ton of juice and a ton of potential here to be in the NFL, and we can see what we have in store for him. And then they add a much needed pass catcher in Trey Harris, who also again has a very high ceiling. The floor could be nothing, but the possibility of what Trey Harris can be. And I've seen some good clips from him, out of OTA so far. So I think that's a really good sign.
Some people were saying that he's already kind of starting to solidify himself as the wide receiver 2. But then I think there was a report from the wide receiver coach saying that no, Quentin Johnson. Hold
your horses.
Yeah, hold your horses. Quentin Johnson's still kind of that guy right now. So we'll kind of have to see how that all plays out. But best offseason I put was the Denver Broncos, and this was mainly on the back of the defensive pieces. Obviously, we didn't highlight them, but getting someone like Hufanga, Greenlaw, and then Jahdae Barron, who was a phenomenal cornerback in college. I think far and away, the rich got richer, like you said earlier. They're going to be a tough team to put points on. And then on top of that, you address the running back situation, get rid of Javonte, and you get RJ Harvey, and then you add another person like Pat Bryant, who has some sneaky upside in this offense. I think they had the best offseason. Going into the worst offseason, I felt like the Las Vegas Raiders had the worst offseason.
Yeah, tell me about this, because I thought they did a pretty good job.
I think they did. Obviously, like the extension of Max Crosby was huge, and trading for Geno. My big thing with them was they couldn't get anything rolling in the rushing side of things, and they didn't have the horses to do it. But like PFF wise, I was looking deeper, into their offensive line rating. They were ranked like 17, 18 in PFF offensive line. I felt like that was a big kind of addressing point right there for them, and it looks like out of most of their moves, I mean, they took a rookie offensive tackle. I don't know how late it was, but I felt like the offensive line needed major attention that it didn't, and so that could be something that kind of holds this team back. Like, I like the pieces that are there with Bowers, Myers, and Betch, to go with Hampton, but if they can't give Geno enough time, or they can't get some push on the offensive line for Genty, they're not going to go that far. Yeah. So that was mainly why I thought they had the worst offseason out of the 4 teams.
That's fair.
So who'd you have, Wu, for the worst offseason?
This one I had no one, but I'll outline it to you this way. So first, we'll start with the Raiders. I'll start from bottom to top. The Raiders, I thought they had a solid offseason. I thought they did the things that they needed to. They brought in some young offensive weapons that they lacked. They upgrade their quarterback situation. They extend Max Crosby. They bring in some other defensive pieces to help on that end. They have Chip Kelly there as an offensive coordinator. Sure. They bring Pete Carroll, in Vegas. So I think there's a lot of solid moves there to, increase what they had last year, because last year was bad. I think they did the necessary things. I don't think there's, besides Genty, I don't think there's like that splash. You got a ton of news attention. But I think they did the things that were needed and are trending in the right direction. Denver, like we said, really beefed up that defense. They're going to be a problem. They get a running back, even though I wasn't huge on the pick when it first happened. Like, they got a running back that they like, so that's important. So I thought they had a good offseason as well. Chargers I've already talked about, so I'm not going to go too much into them.
Yep.
Really, the only one that I thought of maybe didn't have a great offseason would be Kansas City because of the offensive line stuff that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like drastic. Like they did.
They at least addressed the pieces. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they had made the attempts to bring certain people in on top of franchise tagging, like their best offensive guard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things like that.
It wasn't bad enough for me to say that Kansas City had a bad, because I don't think they had a bad offseason. So I'm going to say no one here.
Yeah. And so moving into our biggest fantasy impact, I selfishly put Omarion Hampton. I think if and when he gets the keys to this backfield, I think he's gonna do damage as a running back in this league. I can't wait to see what this guy brings.
Yeah, it's fair.
And who'd you have for a biggest fantasy impact?
I got Genty. There's a reason he's at the top of your rookie drafts.
Pick.
Yeah, there's a reason he's at the top of all the rookie drafts. There's a reason why he's sometimes going in the back of the first round, maybe the early second round of your dynasty startup drafts. Yeah. I think there's a conversation for him to be in the first round of redraft leagues.
I'm telling you, he's going to go in our Bonnet League. He'll go in the first round.
Yeah, running backs are a hot commodity in that league, but I think there's a conversation for him to be consistently in the first round there.
Yeah. That
doesn't happen by accident, so he's going to smash.
Doesn't it feel like Genty's already like a 3-year pro and we've just already discounted? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, we talk about these incoming rookies, and it's like, we talk about everyone but him, and because he's just such a monster. Like, it's insane.
They finally came out with his rushing line on DraftKings. It was like 1,045.
Oh, it's tempting.
It is.
It's so tempting to take the over, but we'll have to see. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is episode 23. Went a little long, but listen, we got to go through all the teams here. Facts. You know what I mean? But we appreciate you listening and also watching. Make sure that you follow us on our socials: Twitter at 4th and Fantasy Pod, Instagram and TikTok at 4th and Fantasy, YouTube at 4th and Fantasy. You get it from a video format, listening audio format. However you want it, we're gonna give it to you. But we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you on the other side.
See ya.